Did you think it was going to be that easy, gents? No, the Penguins were not going to sweep the New York Rangers. But you don't really see many sweeps come playoff time. It is a 1-1 series now. The Penguins drop game 2, 5-2. I'm not really that upset. I don't think any of you all should be either. If you would have told me that it will be a 1-1 series with no Tristan Jarry going back to Pittsburgh, where the Penguins now have home ice for the rest of the series, I would take that, and I know you all would take that as well. I have a full game recap coming up right after this drop. Rachel Nones from the Hockey Writers is going to join me to discuss the game, talk about some Penguins adjustments going into Game 3. That, of course, will be held at PPG Paints Arena on Saturday. Injury updates, all of that. That's all coming up right after this drop.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter, Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen of the day. Just want to say that last episode on Wednesday, it's the most listened to Locked On Penguins episode of all time. I can't thank everyone enough that either listen to this podcast every day of the week, or if this was your first episode, thank you all so much. I'm glad you're here for the ride, and let's keep it going right now as I will bring on Rachel Nones from the Hockey Writers, and this is the third time she's come on the show. And against my better judgment, I'm a very superstitious person. The Rangers have won all 3 times after we've agreed for her to come on. So after this, only if the Penguins win another game, that's when she's going to come on the show. But obviously, Rachel, the Rangers get back into the series after dropping that triple overtime thriller on Tuesday, 1-1 now, best of 5 going back to Pittsburgh, where the Penguins, they did steal home ice. The Rangers do have an opportunity to take home ice back by winning just one of the 2 games in Pittsburgh. What did you see out of the Rangers that was different than Game 1?
They definitely came out ready again, as we did see in Game 1. However, this time they actually sustained that type of play throughout the whole game this time. If you watch Game 1, it was pretty obvious that after the second, or I guess at the beginning of the second, they just were a completely different team than the first. And they had a pretty bad history of doing that in the regular season a little bit earlier on. That was something that they kind of got out of as you went towards the end of the season, but we saw them, kind of pull that once again, which was pretty disheartening as, they ended their season on a pretty high note, beating the Caps. But they played a full 60 minutes this time, and I think the defense looked a lot better today, and then you had your forwards chipping in a lot more defensively. I was definitely a lot less scared. So I just think that the effort all around was a lot better. It was more solid. If you look at the numbers, the giveaways were less this time. They hit the pens way more this time. In Game 1, it was a little bit pretty even with the numbers in terms of hits and things like that. So it was just much more of a physical game, better defense this time from everyone.
Yeah, I definitely thought the Rangers had, more of a jump, especially after the first period. The Penguins, they survived those first 10 minutes. That was what they needed to do to get Louis Domingue comfortable. It's 1-1 going into the second. And then, unlike Game 1, where the Penguins really took it to the Rangers in that second period, it was a little bit of a role reversal. Not as bad, I should say, but the Rangers, they had their legs in. And they needed this game because you don't want to go down 0-2 going back to Pittsburgh. You lose to a third string goaltender who had really never started a playoff game before today. I just think the vibes would have been really off, to say the least. From a Penguins perspective, I'm really not super upset with the way they played. Numbers wise, they had 53% of the shot attempts at 5v5, 57% of the scoring chances, 78% of the high danger chances. They generated over 3 expected goals and had 63% of the expected goals. Sometimes, you win some and you lose some, but honestly, they did, I think, as well as, I shouldn't say they did as well as they could in front of Louis Domingue. Louis Domingue, I should say, did as well as he could given the circumstances. I mean, he's your third string goaltender for a reason. But I definitely thought from a Penguins perspective the defense wasn't as sharp as it was In the first game, part of that I think was due to Mike Matheson having a really off game. That was probably like his worst game going back to where he was in Florida. I should say, to be honest, but the Rangers, credit to them. They got a couple good bounces. Their power play clicked. Yes, the penalties were called on the Penguins, according to actual stats. People, of course, that's all I'm going to say, I think, about that. But I definitely think the special teams battle is, I'll get your thoughts on this. It's definitely playing a big role in this series. The Penguins penalty kill is kind of reverted, I shouldn't say fully back to last season's form, but it's not playing at the level that I know it can play at. What have you noticed, with the special teams and how that's making an effect so far?
Yeah, it's definitely tough if, their opponent isn't playing up to their penalty kill, potential, especially when you're playing the Rangers, who are pretty good on the power play, especially when you have Kreider out there. So, I mean, he's hit 50, he's showing no signs of slowing down, and they haven't really learned their lesson of staying on top of Kreider. I could say the same thing for the Rangers. They have yet to really shut down Sidney Crosby and his line mates, but you got to stay on Chris Kreider. So I think as long as he's out there, it's almost a guarantee power play goal at this point. If it's not Kreider, it's either Strome or Panarin. Now, I just think, they're just, that's one part of the game where they've just carried that over from the regular season. They've kind of lost some other basics about keeping the game simple, but the power play has just been the one thing that's been consistent for them. Even when they weren't doing so well, it wasn't that horrible as it's been in seasons past, but it's just, when that team is that good, you have to at least step up a little bit, and you can't give them chances. So when the officiating's a little bit more even like that, you definitely can't let the Rangers get any extra advantage.
Yeah, and I in terms of the Penguins penalty kill, just players are not getting their sticks into shooting lanes. They're not putting their body, on the line. And also, I think the biggest thing, when they have the puck, they're not getting it out. And obviously, that's the biggest key to surviving, a power play, especially like the Rangers one. And, it's 1-1. You're about to kill it off. There's less than 10 seconds left. You got to find that clear. I think there was one, with 20 or 25 seconds left. I think it was Teddy Bluger or Brian Boyle that had the puck. And they couldn't clear the puck. And, that's these first two games, that has been a massive issue for the Penguins, and it needs to be cleaned up in a big way. The Penguins, they also had the game's first two power plays tonight. You need to take advantage of those situations. One of them, the game was 1-1. Jake Gensel just tied it. He's been phenomenal this series. The puck movement was good, but you got to find a way to get a puck past Shesterkin there and then really ratchet up the pressure on the Rangers to go back and respond against Louis Domingue. So that's definitely, I think, going to be a big storyline as we continue to progress in this series. I'll be curious to see what adjustments Mike Velluci makes on the PK going into Game 3, which, of course, will be at PPG Paints Arena. Obviously, still have more to get to for this episode of Locked On Penguins podcast. We'll get to some players who I think need to either have their, have less minutes, maybe juggle around the lines. Just a couple of adjustments that I think the Penguins should make going into Game 3, and I'll get Rachel's thoughts on that. But before we get to that, our next partner has a product that I literally use every day. My girlfriend and I, we started using Athletic Greens because, we wanted to, get better gut health, more energy. Our immune system was, I guess, kind of at times, but, we also just wanted to try something new out. So with one delicious scoop of Athletic Greens, you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food source superfoods, probiotics to help you start your day right. The special blend of ingredients supports your gut health, your nervous system, your immune system, and your energy, recovery, focus, and your aging. It's lifestyle friendly, whether you eat keto, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free. It also supports better sleep quality and recovery, supports mental clarity and alertness. It's the one thing with the best things. It uses the best of the best products based on the latest science with constant product iterations and third-party testing. It costs you less than $3 a day. You're investing in your health, and it's cheaper than your cold brew habit. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and free travel packs with your first purchase. It's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every single day, and that's it. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that is athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimately daily nutritional insurance. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember, follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at @LO_Penguins. Of course, I'm joined by Rachel Nones of the Hockey Writers. Rachel, I wanted to get your thoughts on, Domingue's performance, because it's hard enough to, you're down your two starting goaltenders. You're playing basically a guy who's been in the AHL all year. And, in my opinion, I thought he really gave them a shot. The first period only gave up one goal, and honestly, that was a bad bounce. I think Sid hit off his stick and then went off Matheson's skate. And if it didn't go off Matheson's skate, it was about to go wide, I'm pretty sure. But in my opinion, he gave them a shot, made some really timely saves. I just thought, the net front coverage, which has been an issue against this team and honestly against other teams, it reared its ugly head again, which it did not in game one. So just wanted to hear what you thought about Louis' performance going into game three, because it sounds like he's probably going to start that game too.
Yeah, I definitely agree. He definitely gave them a shot. The Pens had 41 shots and the Rangers had 40, so it was pretty even. And when you're throwing 40 shots at Louis Domingue and he's stopping, most of those, that's a pretty good sign, especially when you have a team that put too much emphasis on passing the game prior, and they know heading into this game that they have to shoot at the net a lot more. So I remember Vatrano had a few good shots himself too, and Louis stopped all those but one. So especially for a guy who's pretty much going to score on the Penguins, that's pretty good.
Yes, Frank Vatrano, it is Jordan Eberle like at this point. Anytime these two teams play, just even if he maybe doesn't score every game, just take a prop bet. It's very easy to usually score it.
Yeah, I would say he probably has at least like 2-3 more in him. Probably the first home game for Penguins, he's probably going to score again. But he definitely gave them a chance when, I was surprised that the shot count was actually that high for the Rangers. But, a lot of the shots this time too from the Rangers that actually went in, they weren't really up close goals either. So they were a little bit further out, which when you have a guy like Kreider who's tipping in or deflecting a lot of his goals, and obviously that's how a lot of the goals came for the Rangers, but you have Adam Fox who's shooting from the blue line like game one, and things like that, and they're not coming from up close too. That's kind of different for the Rangers too. So that I thought was interesting. That kind of tells me that they're reading him pretty well. At this point, it's not like they saw him a ton in game one. They only had like 17 shots on him last time. So they kind of figured him out. And it looks like shooting from a little bit further back is going to work for them. So, it's good to see that they kind of got away. It wasn't a blowout or anything, 5 goals. That's definitely the rebound that you want to see from the Rangers. So, I thought he played pretty well.
Yeah, and again, I really thought he was dug up. This was the second straight start where, he got screwed by, again, deflections right in front of the net. There was, 2 of them. Again, the last one was against the Flyers, just with about a couple games left of the regular season, where he gave up 3 goals outside of the empty netter. 2 of them, players are standing right in front of them with really, there's no defense. There's no one boxing them out, getting the sticks out of the deflection zone. And that reared its ugly head again tonight for the Penguins. So if they can really clean that up going into game 3, I would like their chances better. They got to get back to defending like they were in game 1. And again, I didn't really have too many problems with how they defended tonight. I think their performance was mainly okay. You got to split out the first 2 games. That's fine. Still, the net front coverage needs to be a lot better going into game 3. And another thing that needs to be a lot better, especially from a Penguins perspective, I'll get your thoughts on the Rangers here. The Rangers, their depth scoring is actually showing up. Andrew Kopp has had a couple goals, Frank Vatrano. The Penguins, though, it's been 4 guys, 4 their highest paid players, of course. Sidney Crosby putting on a show 2 games in a row. Jake Gensel silencing his haters from last year, who apparently think that he's too soft to play in the playoffs, which is just ridiculous because there's only two other players since the 2017 playoffs who have more playoff goals than him, and it's Braden Point and Alex Ovechkin. So that theory can, get out of here. Brian Rust, and it's Evgeny Malkin. That's not good enough. That it reminds me of how the Penguins played, during the late Ray Shero years where, their bottom six guys like Joe Vitale and Craig Adams and all these other, players, they were just not producing. And right now there's too many passengers with Kapanen not producing, even though I thought he had a really good game one. Brock McGinn's not producing. Danton Heinen gone a little bit cold. Evan Rodriguez is good play in the final game of the regular season. That has not translated over. Jeff Carter kind of looks like a corpse on the ice at times. It's definitely a massive issue right now for the Penguins, but from a Rangers perspective, just what are your thoughts on your deadline acquisitions and overall, those bottom six and players chipping in, and also your defenseman outside of Adam Fox?
Definitely. So, if you go back to game one, and it's tough to compare this game to game one since it did have that triple OT and you had the goal that was recalled. So it's hard to reference that game. But, if you go back to it, you have Philip Hedl who scored and then it was recalled. But you have Capo who made a great pass to even make that attempt happen. So if you start there, that kind of starts with the depth. More importantly, it's the kids' depth too. So it's the younger guys who don't have any of this playoff experience. And then, you fast forward to today's game. You have, Kopp, like you mentioned, and you do have the defense pitching in. Braden Schneider had his first postseason point today. And you have Keandre Miller, who's getting assists on things like that too. I can't say enough good things about Frank Vatrano, even when he's not playing Pittsburgh. Same thing with Andrew Kopp. They've just been great additions. And I know a lot of people were kind of griping that all of this depth was just really unnecessary, but I'm not really understanding that argument because we got all of these players for essentially pennies. And in circumstances like this, when you have defenseman Ryan Lindgren out and you need to kind of switch around the lines and things like that, and then you have defenseman Justin Braun in, who he looked fine, was no problem. But you do need guys like, Andrew Kopp and Ryan Reeves, and, he wasn't a deadline pickup, but you just need that flexibility because players are going to get hurt like Barclay Goodrow. So you just need to be able to have that flexibility. That's a good thing that Gallant, always strives for. And he's been a coach in the playoffs, so he kind of knows how that works. So, yeah, I mean, I can't say it enough that the pickups have been absolutely essential. GM Drury did a really good job with that. So it continues to pay off. I mean, even in the rest of the regular season. And, it's just really nice to see that carry over into the postseason as well.
Yeah, and obviously the one Penguins deadline pickup is not available right now. Ricard Raquel, I believe he has a concussion. Mike Sullivan hasn't really confirmed it, but they're being very, I guess, quiet with their injuries. I mean, and that's very typical for any playoff team, I think, at this point. One last thing, Rachel, before we get to a commercial break. The Penguins, they pushed hard in those first 6 to 7 minutes of the third. A couple of times it looked like they were going to tie the game. Shesterkin had one hell of a save on Evgeny Malkin. I think if Chino elevates that, probably a goal, but still, the way he was able to slide across and get his pad down for that was really nice. Sidney Crosby, same thing, a beautiful pass from Jake right to his stick. Doesn't elevate it as much, but still gets more wood on it than Gino. Another ridiculous save. And then that was able to fuel the Rangers to get a couple of insurance goals. The fourth one was definitely a bit lucky because it went off Mike Matheson's skate and right in, just a harmless play right to the front of the net. But you know what? That's what happens sometimes in the NHL. Obviously his play has been a big talking point in the series, as it was always going to be. I'm not really going to get into the whole Jeff Carter thing. It was a dumb play, but also, I don't really think he needed to stay down for 5 minutes and act like he died. So that's my take on it. It's not going to really, everyone's probably going to forget about it, I think, going into game 3.
Maybe a piece of him did die. Maybe he didn't as a whole, but a piece of Shesterkin we lost in that moment. So he could take all the time.
He did say he is okay after the game, and I was like, oh, thank God. I would hope that you're okay after going down like that. That's for sure. But getting back to his overall play, Rachel, just what have you seen just from his game and all that just had him play like this? Because, it's just, there were definitely, I think, not a lot of questions, but some questions, could this play carry over to the playoffs? Because sometimes new goalies in the playoffs, they get overwhelmed. Sergei Bobrovsky, for example, he's been great in the regular seasons, really bad in the playoffs. I didn't think Shesterkin was going to be like that bad, but, you never know at times. So just walk me through what you've seen from him, because, he made a couple of dazzling saves tonight when the Penguins probably should have tied the game a couple times early on in the third.
Yeah, I mean, you have to keep in mind too, there was a little bit like a 4-day break between the postseason starting and the regular season. So, and he didn't play those last, I think, 2 games for the regular season. So it's been, I'm not making excuses, and I think he still looked good in game 1, but he's a little bit out of rhythm with things like that. So, obviously you don't want to put your starting goaltender out in those last 2 games, especially when you're playing the Capitals, your Vezina goaltender, no less. So, obviously the right call there, but yeah, I think he just had to get back into it. Obviously his first game against the Penguins, it didn't go the way that the Rangers wanted to. It went scoreless until the last period. So, I don't know if that brought back any memories like that, or at this point, the mental mistakes and the mental game is going to be huge here. So I don't know if it was something like that. Obviously, he doesn't have that playoff experience to draw off of. He doesn't have much experience at all. I mean, this is like his 3rd season. So, yeah, I just think, it was a matter of nerves maybe. They all said, similar things with the guys who made their debuts, that maybe after like the first 10 minutes, you start to like settle in and things like that. Obviously the time frame's different for every player and every position, but to me, it just looked a little bit nervous. Probably as nervous as we'll ever see him in that first game, but he just really seemed to settle down this game. Obviously he knew what he was getting into, and probably just felt better prepared going into this game, to be honest. So, yeah, like I mentioned, he had a couple of great saves. That's, nothing new to Ranger fans. So I think he's really just, leaning in on whatever little experience that he has prior.
Yeah, no, I agree with that, for sure. Still have a little more to get to for this episode. Going to talk a little bit about, game 3 and potentially what to expect as the series will shift to Pittsburgh. And Rachel, it sounds like she will be there for that game. So that's going to be definitely interesting to see her in front of all those probably 17, 18,000 gold jerseys, because they usually hand those out for the playoffs. I'm sure they're going to do that again. But before we get to our final segment, betonline.net is your number one source for all of your betting stats and sports info. You can find all the latest sports developments, league reviews, and news, including this year's basketball playoffs, Major League Baseball, and this weekend's Run to the Roses at the Kentucky Derby. Yes, that is coming back. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, from live betting to playoffs, esports, and more. You can head to the website today or use your phone to learn more about the trends in action. That is BetOnline, where the game starts. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I am your host, Hunter Hodes. Remember to follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes. Follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. So from a Penguins perspective, I'm curious to see what Mike Sullivan does with the Lions going into game 3. I mean, who knows who's going to come back? I would assume Jason Zucker is going to be ready. He took warm up tonight. I think personally, if they're down 1-0 in the series, he plays. But I think Sully was kind of just like, hey, take a couple more days, rest. You're probably ready to go. But, if we win tonight, it's basically a bonus. We have at least a split going back to Pittsburgh, where we now have home ice. I would expect to see him back. But, in terms of, anyone else, I don't think Rickard Rakell is going to be back, in my opinion. But, in terms of some shuffling that I would like to see, I think it's finally time we see Teddy Bluger take Jeff Carter's minutes. Carter, I know he had almost 20 goals this year, but he has just been really bad for the last 6 to 8 weeks. I know he had the incident, of course, involving Shesterkin, but even outside of that, he's for some reason still the first skater over on the 6-on-5 attack, which is just ridiculous. He really is not bringing anything to the table right now, both offensively and defensively. His line's getting caved in on a nightly basis. Teddy, he hasn't been doing a lot offensively, but I think if he were to get better line mates and better minutes, I think that could start to change. And I definitely think he is in need to score a goal or set up a goal in the playoffs, because, he's too good of a player to keep being this quiet. to say the least. What are you really looking forward to here for Game 3, Rachel, as the series shifts?
So with Barclay Goodrow out, and at this point he is week to week, I'm just interested to see kind of how the lines are going to continue to move. I don't suspect that Gallant would keep the same exact lines, though. Obviously, you did see a good result here. I thought Dryden Hunt, he came in, and I thought he had a nice game, but just with all the injuries, and hopefully there aren't any other ones that are going to occur, although you can definitely expect, more physicality from this series going forward. I'm just curious to see how the lines and the D pairs are going to look. I know it's not really an ideal time right now to kind of experiment with those kinds of things, and with the defense looking a lot like their normal selves this game, you don't really want to split up those pairs, but I think that the defense this season's just been, it gelled so fast and so well that you kind of do have that freedom if you really did want to move certain pairs around. Again, I don't think it's the best time, but you've just had guys that have stepped up. Keandre Miller, there's another level of his game that we've seen this season. And, having Patrick Nemeth and Justin Braun, that gives you more flexibility as well. So I'm just curious to see kind of how the lines go. I think Adam Fox, he kind of ended the regular season in a slump, and it's kind of nice to see him revert back to himself. I mean, you just watch him on the power play, and it's looking like Pittsburgh's trying to clear, and he just says, nope, he gets the puck, and he just gives them unlimited chances. I mean, it's crazy. It's so nice to see him play like himself again, and it just seemed like after his injury, when he came back, he just wasn't playing the same. So I think the rest just helped him, and this is the perfect time for him to step up. So I'm really curious to see who else steps up. I think Artemi Panarin's having a really rough time defensively. Obviously he's still that
him going up against the Sid line has been no bueno, to say the least, especially after what Sid did to him tonight. I was like, whoa.
Yeah, and even in the regular season, he's looked really shaky defensively. I mean, there was like this one really bad overtime move that he pulled that I think led to the other team winning the game in overtime, which is just not good. It's just been a recurring theme so much. If it were one or two times, it'd be like, okay, whatever, it's still Artemi Panarin. But it's just, I've seen a lot. I've seen a lot of the same thing happening, and it's just, I don't know at what point that's gonna not be the case anymore. But yeah, just looking at defense, like game 1 was the first time I've actually been like very not confident in the defense. So I'm just looking, they jumped in and they did a lot better this game. So I'm just looking forward to them like getting back to the best that they can be.
Yeah, I totally hear you on that. From a Penguins perspective, defensively, I'm curious to see if Brian Dumoulin is not able to go. And I had no idea he was hurt. Even coming into this game, he took the morning skate, seemed fine, and then all of a sudden he's not on the ice for warm-up. Mike Matheson took his spot on the top pairing. I don't think him and Letang work well together. But the thing is, if Dumoulin is out, who are you going to put up there? I mean, is Marcus Pettersson going to take those minutes? Probably not, because him and John Marino are playing great together. Shout out to John Marino. These last 2 games, it's probably the 2 best games of his career. I know I ragged on him a lot during the season because his offensive game wasn't there, and defensively he wasn't nearly as good as he used to be. But this has been probably the finest hockey I think I've seen him play. He's controlling the scoring chances in his own zone. He's been on the ice for far more scoring chances for, ripping the puck a lot more than net. I mean, that's hopefully the key to him really unlocking his offensive potential. I don't think he's going to go up on the top pairing. Is Mark Friedman going to do that? Probably not. Chad Riedel, probably not. They don't really have that good of an option, but I still don't think that, that pairing works together. So I think the Penguins, they got to hope that Brian Dumoulin's injury is not super serious, to say the least. And obviously goaltending wise, they got to pray at this point that one of the two can come back. I even said going into this series, even with, DeSmith healthy, I took the Rangers in 7 games. If it's Domingue for the rest of the series, it could go a little shorter than that. I was never really that high on the Penguins' chances of winning the series. Yes, they've gone up a little bit after these last 2 games, just because I've really liked the way they've played for the most part. But this is going to be a battle. I said going into this, none of these results should really surprise anyone, but the Penguins have shown up, I think, a lot more than some other people expected them to. And, it's a best of 5 now, and it's going to be a lot of fun, I think, down the stretch here. I think we've covered everything from the game tonight, at least. I'm not really going to get into a whole spiel about, Madison Square Garden with the officiating and why they were sounding like the Bell Center. There's people can run wild with conspiracy theories all they want. I'm here to tell people that NHL refs just suck at their jobs. That's at the end of the day. People can whine and complain that, this team gets all the calls or it's rigged and all that. These people have no evidence to back their claims up, and it's just wrong. I'll say that, until people can provide me with statistical evidence that the A-League rigs games in favor of the Penguins. And it's just, I don't even really want to fully get into it, but it was just a really embarrassing display every time someone went down. Just people were booing like it was just the Bell Center. But, I had to throw out there a little bit just because it was just insane. But, Rachel, excited to have this series shift. I'm excited for you to be at the game so you can experience. I believe this will be your first playoff game at PPG. It's not Mellon Arena like loud, but PPG, it can get up there, to say the least. Do you have any other final thoughts before we wrap up this episode?
Yeah, I just want to say Rangers in 5, actually. I would like them to win at home at least. Likely I think it's going to go to a 6, but I don't want them to win in Pittsburgh. So I do want them to be home for that. But yeah, it's going to be a long series. It's going to be a pretty physical one. I'm just curious. Let's say that the Rangers do advance from this point on. Obviously, they don't have anywhere near the experience of the Pittsburgh Penguins. So I'm curious how this first round is going to take a toll on them if they advance. I'm just curious what their game plan is going to be for the next series. It's looking like, Carolina is going to come out on top. So
it's going to be Carolina.
Well, I don't know, but anything could happen. That's, this is my first playoff series, but I've already learned like anything can happen at this point. So, yeah, I just, I'm just excited to see how it goes. I kind of want it to end already, but trying to make the most of it.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a great game. PPG is going to be electric as always. I know in the early years it wasn't that loud, but after 2016 onward, it has been. I think they're going to be extra loud this time, just because this could be it for the Penguins core. And to your Rangers in 5 statement, hopefully that's a bunch of cap, as the kids like to say, at least.
No.
So that'll do it though for this episode. Rachel, I appreciate you coming on. I'm sure you're probably going to come on at some other point in the series. Hopefully
I have to if I have to hit the 5 mark, to be on pace with that. So I have to.
Yes, we will iron out the details very soon. This time I'm going to make sure it's after our Penguins win, so we can get this literal superstitious crap out of here, to say the least. But Rachel, in case no one has listened to you on the show before, tell them where they can follow you on Twitter and where they can read your work.
So I cover the Rangers for the Hockey Writers, and I'm on Twitter, probably way too much, but the handle for that is just Rachel NHL.
There you have it. Rachel Knowns of the Hockey Writers joining the show yet again. And yes, very likely she will be on the show again at some point in this series. So Friday we'll have another episode going into a preview for Game 3, touching on a lot more for what the Penguins need to do to win that game, injury updates, all that. No, this is going to be a great series, people. If the people that thought it was going to be easy for any team, it's not. It's big for the Penguins to get that split. If they didn't win that game on Tuesday, and they'd be up a creek right now, to say the least. But it's 1-1, Game 3 on Saturday, 7:00 in Pittsburgh. If anyone's going to the game, outside of Rachel, who of course will be repping the Rangers, I hope everyone makes a lot of noise at PPG.
No booing.
Yeah. I don't need PPG to sound like Madison Square Garden, where a bunch of mouth breathers are just mad that there's no calls. So that's my closing statement for the show today. Thank you all so much for listening, and I'll be back with another episode on Friday.